So folks, we're waiting for a few more people to join us before we start. It's okay, there are no attendees. Yes. Bangle, bangle, the gavel hasn't banged. But it sounds like, our chair. Yeah.
Oh, hello. There's a big car, actually. I was just like on my phone playing a puzzle and someone's like, hey, Diana. And I was like, what? No, we might not. Yeah, doesn't look like it. Thank you for coming. Yes, thank you.
Transportation, it's 5. Land use is 7.
Transportation is 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. And I resigned from transportation. Shit.
You would have added, another one to the quorum requirement.
That's true.
So it
That's
matters
true.
then.
Yeah. All right.
We are.
You call roll?
I think I'll start.
I think so. Why not?
I'm going to call roll for both committees. We're going to start with land use landmarks. If you are joining us on Zoom, please remember to unmute yourself, acknowledge your name, and then mute yourself again. Diana Gonzalez.
Here.
Thank you. Aaron Keith. Joan Body. Thank you. Gabino Morales Escamilla. Kenny Guan. Julia Melzer Harris. Moshe Hecht. Nicholas Jackson. Jeremy Kaplan. Christina Lem. Paul Mack. Antoinette Martinez. Karen Rolnick. Thank you. Damaris Santiago. John Santori. Maria Roca. 3, you do not have a quorum. We'll move on to transportation. Katie Walsh.
Present.
Thank you. John DeLuper. Thank you. Joan Body. Thank you. George Cardona. Jerry Chan. Thank you. Jamie Freed. Dan Kaminsky. Thank you. Roberto Martinez. Gabino Morales. Maria Roca. Sam Sierra. Faye Walker. 5. Your committee has a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Transportation and land use, we're still happy to have you here. Okay. Joint meeting. So I'll just start out. I'm Katie Walsh. I'm the chair of the Transportation Committee. We're really grateful that everyone was able to join because we know that we called this meeting relatively last minute, and we'll hear in the presentation from the representative from Department of City Planning, Juki, who's going to talk through the special text amendment for last mile, just to kind of better understand the timing overall. Okay. So before we do that, before we pass over, there were just a couple things that what's that? Oh, okay. A couple of things that I just wanted to mention is in terms of timelines associated with the special text last mile, which we'll hear from the city. But I just want to acknowledge the role that Community Board 7 had in catalyzing and convening the change that we're going to see today. So I think the understanding of what community boards can do and in terms of positive change and momentum is really, again, convening, catalyzing, and making effective change. And this board has done that through the last several years on this issue in particular, where we pulled Department of City Planning, Department of Transportation together in these early meetings, kind of in the height of the pandemic, when we were really feeling the impacts of these trucking facilities and last mile trucking that had already started to be built out in our community and in neighboring Red Hook and Community Board 6, to really ask these questions around accountability, responsibility, management, and overall vision in terms of how the city was going to be managing, again, the plethora of these facilities, and then the impact that that has on our roads, infrastructure, transportation, safe streets, accessibility, air quality, you name it, several of the impacts as a result of these facilities. So we have seen progress. We're going to hear again from the Department of City Planning about timelines associated with this. Then we'll open to questions. We'll take questions from board members first, those that are in the room, and then board members who are joining virtually. Then we will go to any questions from the public, anyone who's here in the room, and then virtually. And then we'll go to public comment. We have 3 minutes if there's any additional public comment. And then the last agenda item is just a further discussion if needed on the presentation. So thank you, everybody, for coming, making time for this. We also have our board meeting on Wednesday night of this week. So that's our full community board meeting on Wednesday. With that, I will pass to Juki. And you have a presentation that's loaded up, right? So thank you so much again for coming.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juki Sai. I work for the Department of City Planning. I'm the liaison for Community Board 7, Sunset Park, Windsor Terrace. And before I get into it, I also just want to mention tonight, I'm not going to be going into the substance of the proposal. There is an information session that is very detailed about the substance of the proposal coming up on April 24th, and then a subsequent public meeting on it. But I just wanted to go through, again, kind of some of what got us here and some important dates coming up. So thank you. Slide, please, Jeremy. So just want to start off by recognizing the long-standing call from Community Board 7 for regulation of last mile facilities. This is something that we've heard a lot from this board. This is a screenshot from back in 2022, April of 2022, shortly after I started at the department. This was a meeting called by the Community Board 7 Last Mile Special Committee on Trucking, I believe. And even far before my time, Community Board 7 had been working with the Department of City Planning, Department of Transportation, as Katie mentioned, and calling for reform and regulation on this matter. Next slide, please. So in many ways, as a result of the longstanding advocacy of the board, as well as the local elected officials, local council member, in June 2024, this is some context for it, the city council passed zoning for economic opportunity, and this was a zoning text amendment intended to remove outdated limitations on businesses to support growing industries and help local retail corridors thrive. As part of this process, and this went through public review, I came and presented to the board here. We had a great discussion on it. As part of this process, the mayoral administration and the city council agreed that the Department of City Planning would advance a zoning change application to regulate last mile facilities. And as you can see on this slide here, there's a deadline of March 30th, 2025 for issuing a scoping notice. And I'll talk in the upcoming slides about what scoping is. Next slide, please. So I'm sharing here a bit of the timeline, and this goes back to June 2024 when the original agreement was reached. After that, during the summer of 2024, the Department of City Planning, who was tasked with taking on this text amendment, set up a team across our internal divisions as well as other city agencies, and then started defining the use, like what last mile is. This was kind of a complex thing, but again, it's something we're going to go into in the public-facing information session. And then after that, it was just kind of getting to drafting the actual proposal itself, which again will be presented on the 24th. So March 28th, and this gets back to the deadline mentioned, that March 30th deadline in part of the agreement following zoning for economic opportunity. The department released a few kind of key documents, and one of those, and it might have been even preceding March 28th, but it was certainly before March 30th, was the draft scope of work. So there is a public document, and it's online. I'm going to highlight it in subsequent slides where you can read through the proposal. And the intent here is, again, this is just part of the typical procedure with a text amendment like this. In addition to the draft scope of work released, there's a whole slew of public documents. There was also a market study. I'll cover that in a subsequent slide. I want to note, though, that this is all part of the, what I've been saying, the scoping process. This is not the sort of, this is preceding the ULURP process. Okay, next slide, please, Jeremy. So a key thing here, just want to define is scoping, and just want to sort of go through it for those who may not be familiar. This is a step in the environmental review process that precedes certification, or the typical start to ULURP, where we go certify at the City Planning Commission, Community Board, Borough President, City Planning Commission, and then to the City Council. Essentially, what scoping is, it's the process of determining what will be analyzed by the environmental review for the project. This is a required step in the seeker process, the sort of environmental review process, for projects where significant impacts are identified and that require an environmental impact statement. And that's just a very typical thing for a text amendment. A text amendment of this size requires more intense environmental review. So at this point, the lead agency, in this case, the Department of City Planning, issues a draft scope of work, which is what I mentioned, and we solicit public comments before we finalize it. So this is something, the first step was emailing out the board some of this information, but the follow-up steps for that, and again, I'll touch on this at the end and give you more details on it, are first an information session on April 24th, and then a public scoping meeting on May 6th. So yes, actually, let's stick to this slide for a moment. As I mentioned, the draft scope of work is what the department issued publicly. This is available on our website. You can see the link here, and I'm happy to send that to Jeremy as well. But in the draft scope of work, it is the kind of bones of the proposal. And again, at this point in the process, this is not the sort of part of the ULERP process where the board issues, or typically where the board convenes, issues a recommendation. This is a part of the process where we are soliciting comments on the scope of the environmental review. And it is really, it's less so about the proposal itself and more so about the environmental review being conducted for it. I think it's a very technical process. It follows, literally by law, has to follow the seeker technical manual. And this is, I'm not intending to just throw a bunch of jargon out. It's just the point being, there's a very specific legal process that needs to be followed for this. And this is all part of following that process. But also, we want to make sort of some of these materials, by law we have to, but we also want to make sure people are aware of these materials. In addition to the draft scope of work, there's a few other documents available online, but one I wanted to highlight was, as part of this process, the Department of City Planning commissioned a market study, which goes into, it's a report essentially that addresses some of the demand for last mile facilities operating in New York City, as well as employment and wages, the distribution of these facilities, and the economic impact of these facilities. And you'll also note, if you read any of this, and I'm sure some of you already have, it introduces the term parcel delivery facility, which you guys will hear about at the info sessions. So just to close this out, I just want to kind of highlight our big next steps here. And Jeremy, if you go to the next slide. So the big upcoming meetings are April 24th, 6:30 p.m., and this is virtual. And it will be an overview of the proposal itself. And this is going to be led by our transportation division. Those are the experts on this project. And it's also going to be followed by an opportunity to ask questions. So if you have questions about the technical details of the proposal, please come to this session and please ask those questions then. And there will be details on how to participate posted on nyc.gov/engage. Now, May 6th, I mentioned scoping. This is the part of the process where we, the Department of City Planning in this case, solicit feedback on the scope of the environmental review. We take written comments, and you can submit those at any time, whether as an individual or whatever format you want to do it. But May 6th at 2 p.m. virtually, we will hold a scoping meeting. And again, this is a time when the Department of City Planning will present what some of the proposal is, and then have an open time to solicit feedback on the environmental review process that is part of this. And this is all, again, preceding the certification process. The follow-up from the scoping meeting is the kind of continued drafting of the proposal and the submission of the follow-up pieces. But we don't have any dates on the actual, when this will be brought to certification, and I don't have those dates available. Please feel free to ask about that at the information session, but it's not something I have on hand currently. So again, those big 2 dates coming up, April 24th, and then May 6th for the actual scoping meeting, if you have comments on the scope of the environmental review for this project. So yeah, that is what I have tonight, and happy to take any questions about the process here. And but I do want to just say, again, Community Board 7 has been really a key instrumental player in pushing forward the city's, regulation of last mile facilities. And I want to, thank you for your advocacy, and then also note that there's a lot of technical details, which I'm not touching on tonight, but there will be a lot of people who can answer them at these sessions.
Can I just,
Please.
is there a deadline for comments on the draft scope?
Let me find that. Probably after May 6th, but I'm not sure if it is May 6th.
Okay,
I'll
yeah,
follow.
I think we as the community board would probably like to weigh in a more formal capacity than just having this meeting and then going to public session. And so would think it'd be great if we could have a deadline that is after the community board meets in May.
Oh, I can look up the written comment deadline.
Okay.
And I do think part of it is just adhering to, there's specific like timelines laid out in the seeker technical manual, and I'll make sure to look up and figure out when that deadline is.
Right, that would be really helpful. My other concern was having the scoping meeting in the middle of workday. Is it at all possible to move that to an evening? Or have one in the evening, an additional meeting or something like that?
I think part of this is it's just sort of typically how, like the time it's done. And the idea is that there's written comments submitted outside of that time period, but I can definitely inquire about it.
I think so. I think it's important because defining the scope makes such a huge impact on what ends up being certified. And I think it's great that you're here and that we're having this conversation early, because once the scope is carved in stone, there's so much less that we as a community can do to advocate for as good a policy as possible. So whatever flexibility is possible on DCP's end, we'd really appreciate. That's all I had for now.
Thank you. And I know we jumped ahead, and Juki, I just want to ask you, it doesn't have to be in the technical definition of how it's defined in the zoning text amendment, but just to almost go back very quickly in your definition of last mile and the problem that the text amendment is trying to solve, just to kind of catch people up who were coming in and listening to this for the first time. I realized that in the presentation, we just rushed ahead and went straight to the last mile zoning text amendment without just broadly saying, what is it trying to solve for?
Right. So I think a lot of this is related to, I mean, I think it was sort of defined as, like earlier talked about, as there's a lot of the new facilities, like typically people refer to Amazon facilities or UPS facilities or DHS. A lot of facilities where there is a high volume of truck traffic or van traffic going in and out. And a lot of these are facilities where packages that are sort of already, things that are already packaged come in, get sorted, and go out. And it's something that was highlighted, and I think by the board, by various community groups, by local elected officials, Councilmember Aviles, as something that community members were flagging as creating both environmental hazards as far as both like traffic, like truck and van traffic, creating potential traffic violence, as well as environmental hazards of the emissions created by these vehicles. So that's just a little bit of the background, and that was sort of some of the origins of the call for regulation of these facilities.
Super helpful, thank you. And then I'll ask another question and move on to others. Is there the language that you said is you're not sure when it would be brought forward to the actual like certification process, right? And we can ask that in the public meeting. I know that there's a June mayoral election. Does that have anything to do with the process and timelines? Because I think that is a concern with a lot of projects and policies right now, is sort of the upheaval that the June mayoral election presents, or is this completely separate?
That's a great question. I mean, to my personal awareness, I think this is just kind of independent and moving along as would be typical text, but I think it's worth asking and inquiring. But yeah, it's something that, in my understanding, it's proceeding as would typically, like a zoning text like this would typically proceed.
Can open up to questions in the room from any board members or committee members before going online. If there's any questions, and there's a mic if anyone in the room had any questions. No questions yet. Okay, and then anything on? Okay.
Hey, Juki.
I can repeat whatever you say too, and
My question is there an opportunity to comment about the content before? I know there's an official meeting, but is there also an opportunity?
So my question was just, for those that can't make the April 24th date, is there a way that we can do an in-house? Like, can you come and present some of that information to either the committees or the board or anything like this?
I can definitely, I can definitely ask about that. I think part of it is our team presenting is like one of our central divisions. And I can ask either, how much they're able to go out and present. I think a lot of the idea was to have this information session be available, like as widely available as possible so that people can go, and part of why it's being done online. And I can also see if there's like a video of it that we can send out for anyone who wants to view it. But yeah, I can ask about that.
Do we have the information yet about this info session? Okay, okay, okay. So it's in our newsletter, and then we'll announce it again at the board meeting on Wednesday. So Juki, there was a board member who couldn't come who's on land use, and had sent questions through about exemptions. Is that one of those technical questions that should be asked in an information session?
Yeah, that'll be, I think, pretty extensively covered in the information sessions. And yeah, if there are questions following that up, if there are outstanding questions, like definitely let me know.
And there's no hands virtually either. Okay. Okay, okay. And then I have one last question to close out, but we can go to Karen. I guess just come up since the
This draft scope, about how long is the document?
It's about 32 pages.
Okay, because the last time something came through on ULURP change, there were dozens and dozens and dozens of legalese pages, and we discovered at the 11th hour that there was some language that we didn't like. So what I'm wondering is, do we want to use some of our discretionary funds to hire an attorney to read through it when it is released? And that's not a question for you as much as it is for us.
can raise this in the board meeting on Wednesday for new business. But it's a good point. And I think, Karen, what you're saying is like when the ULURP, when it gets released, when it gets certified, that it's possible it'll be extensive and we won't understand it. I think at this moment, it's all about the scoping opportunity. And I think what Diana said at the beginning and Juki's point is like now is the moment for us to be weighing in as much as possible. So just Juki with you here, the other question I will ask and close out is, from your perspective, you work with community boards and you serve as liaison with DCP, not from a technical standpoint, but just broadly speaking, what are the types of things that you think community boards should be paying attention to in the zoning text amendment? What are the types of things that we should be thinking about, we should be concerned about, so that we can kind of have that in our mind when we show up to this April meeting?
Great question. I would think just about your experience walking around, biking around the neighborhood, and yeah, just like when you look at what sort of the way the special permit will seek to regulate last mile facilities, I think it's worth just you know, once you parse it out, and I know it can be, it can be sort of sometimes technical, and hopefully the information we're putting out makes it sort of easily understandable. But just sort of, you know, thinking through like, do I feel like this would help me in my experience in the neighborhood generally? It's hard to pick out the exact things because I think everyone's looking for different things as far as their priorities. But yeah, thinking about traffic safety, air quality. Um, yeah, I would just sort of think about your everyday experience and bring that with you as you sort of sit down and think about this and opine on it.
All right, well, we appreciate you making the time to come and speak to the board. This is a special opportunity that DCP came ahead of this public information session. And I think Land Use and Transportation wanted to be on the record that we've hosted DCP coming and giving us the heads up, because once it moves to that ULERP process, there's still a moment to have a voice and to have advisory, but this is a really unique chance during scoping. So thank you for giving us the heads up, Juki. We will stress this in our meeting on Wednesday, and then we'll talk as a committee in a few minutes after public comment. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And should I get out of here while you guys talk? I can do that.
All public, so
Okay.
you can, if you, we'd love to have you.
Everyone.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move to public comment, and for the committee meetings, if there's anyone in the room that wanted to give public comment, you can raise your hand, and we have 3 minutes. Okay, come up, Nebraska. Yeah, you can go to the mic, yeah. And just introduce yourself and, yeah.
All right. First, I want to thank CB7 for allowing this public comment part. Good evening. My name is Nebraska Hernandez, the climate justice sub-advocate at UPROSE. UPROSE is a founding member of the Last Mile Coalition, launched in December 2021. This is a citywide coalition of environmental justice and public health advocates fighting to regulate last mile trucking facilities in New York City. The coalition has worked for a zoning resolution text amendment adoption to mitigate the explosive growth of last mile trucking facilities. And as part of the Last Mile Coalition, UPROSE has been educating Sunset Park residents on the dangers associated with truck and warehouse pollution. I know, Katie, you came to the Last Mile info session. At our office in February, we trained residents on how to submit public testimony to City Council and inform them on upcoming dates, like the dates that were given in this presentation, on last mile related legislation. And we're pleased that the city is moving forward with its zoning text amendment, and thank the Department of City Planning for giving a presentation to the community board today. I will be getting a little bit more technical to flag those technicalities that Last Mile Coalition is concerned with so that the community board knows. The city's proposed zoning text amendment differs from the Last Mile Coalition's proposed zoning text amendment. First, as we all know, Sunset Park, along with other waterfront neighborhoods like Red Hook, Maspeth, and Hunts Point, are already overburdened by last mile facilities, as well as its associated truck pollution. UPROSE, as well as other members of the coalition, is deeply concerned that the proposed zoning text amendment does not do enough to prevent clustering of the facilities in disadvantaged communities. Our proposal recommended a distance of 1,000 feet between the facilities and sensitive receptors such as schools, NYCHA developments, parks, and nursing facilities, as well as other last mile facilities. The city, on the other hand, proposed zoning text amendments only explicit buffer is 500 feet from residential zones, and we are concerned that this will not do enough to prevent clustering and may not be a suitable buffer for residential zones next to M zones, especially those from 3rd Avenue to the waterfront. If 500 feet is used because of density in New York City, then other safeguards must be added to limit concentration and require equitable geographic distribution of these facilities citywide. Second, and when we talked about the exemptions that you had another community board member ask about, the city's proposed zoning text amendment also provides an exemption of review for water-dependent facilities. According to page 15 of the last mile parcel delivery facilities market assessment, some PDFs are located on the waterfront, but they are not currently using the water to move goods since the network for maritime shipping of parcels is still being developed. While DCP is using the definition of water-dependent facilities already in the zoning resolution, they also carve out an ambiguous exception of this definition with and I quote, or by similar standards to be specified by DCP. This is similar to their electric vehicle charging infrastructure standards. Both of this ambiguous definitions can mean anything and should be defined. Lastly, we need transparency and timely access to the zoning text. Community members cannot meaningfully participate if the official zoning resolution language is not fully available. Once again, we thank DCP for moving forward with this very necessary zoning text amendment, and we look forward to continuing to work with CB7, other community orgs in order to reach environmentally just solutions regarding last mile. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And that's very, very helpful information for public comment to help inform us. Any other hands for public comment? Jeremy, virtually? No. Okay. Okay. So not seeing any other in the room. So we can just move to the last agenda item, which is the committee discussion on this and proposing next steps. So some of these questions were already asked about this. Karen had brought up a good point around possibility of hiring a consultant if we need to read through this, but let's just open this up. So this is for committee discussion, and want to defer to Diana if you wanted to raise anything.
Yeah, I guess I just want to say that, I'm newish to the community board, so a lot of this conversation happened before my tenure, but I'm very excited that this is happening right now, and I think it's an incredible opportunity for Sunset Park to be able to weigh in further. I'd like us to create a formal statement from CB7 about the draft scope and weigh in an official capacity. I know it's not necessary, but I'd like to do so, because with the scope, you really set the parameters of what can be in the final language. And to be able to be involved this early on is a huge opportunity, and I don't want to waste it. I do want us to think about when we are doing our work, is that that having this be a ULERP process gives us the ability to negotiate in a way that we don't have with all these facilities being as of right. And so we can think about things like, do you want to think about, distance from other locations, from sensitive places like schools and homes? Do we want to have a demand of a certain percentage of hiring from within our community district? Do we want to demand electric trucks instead of diesel-powered trucks? Like, there's a lot of things that we can ask for with this existing as part of the zoning code. So I'm really excited about this. I think it's fantastic, and I look forward to working together and coming up with a really robust set of comments that'll hopefully drive this into a better direction.
Come up and grab the mic.
Hey guys, I've been looking at specifically the transportation section of this scope draft, and the environmental review of things like traffic, transit, pedestrians, and safety is all contingent on certain projections. Like, if it's anticipated that there will be 50 more trips as a result of this change, then we will review this section. Is there any way that we could get a sense of like where in our community district these thresholds are anticipated to be met? Is that's kind of for you guys. Is that a possibility? Yeah. Like, oh, anticipated vehicle. He's asking if it's anticipated vehicle counts from facilities. Okay, yeah. So the in the transportation section, all of the environmental review will happen at areas that meet certain thresholds, like 50 more cars or 200 more pedestrians or 12 crashes per year. Can you tell us where in our community district is anticipated to meet those thresholds? So like where might actually be reviewed versus not from a transportation perspective?
Sorry, Yeah, I don't have a great answer to that question. I think a lot of it is as far as the like the thresholds. You know what? I'll go back and ask our environmental review division. If you could, yeah, like especially if you could like write that up in email, I will happily pass it along because I'm not sure. I don't quite. I need to read the chapter and understand what you're saying as well. But let's talk some more, and I can happily try to get you an answer on that.
And Juki is the kind of city liaison. When we send him questions, he responds and he sends the responses back. So, okay. Any other questions? Okay, there's a hand up virtually.
Antoinette Martinez, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, I just had a quick question. Would it be possible for Uprose to provide the board with their recommendations?
Yes, so they'll send the testimony that they provided today virtually, and then with any corresponding information, yeah, we can pass it along.
Great. And do we know if there are any other coalitions citywide that may be also looking into this that may also have recommendations?
I was gonna say, yeah, Uprose can submit our stuff to CB7, and then I know Last Mile Coalition is gonna have like a coalition-wide recommendations, but obviously Uprose's is more Sunset Park specific. That's what I was gonna say.
Are there, what are the other organizations that are in that?
Point, I believe Red Hook Initiative, Earth Justice. Yeah, I think those are the organizations. I'm probably missing like one or two.
And Antoinette, I'm not aware of any other coalitions outside of that one that has been organizing around the last mile special text amendment, but I am going to try and join on April 24th so I can see what other questions are being asked then.
Great. And can you just confirm again what's going on the 24th?
The public information session to learn more about the last mile zoning text amendment in depth and explained by the experts, but meant for the public. So it was
Okay.
included in the CB7 bulletin, and then we'll stress it again at the board meeting this Wednesday for people to join.
Okay, thank you.
No other hands up. Okay. So just to follow up on the point that Diana made, so what does it mean to make a formal recommendation? What is your sense of timelines in terms of how you want to do that? What is the homework assignment is to read the scoping document, go to April 24th, and then what would the next step look like for us?
Well, yeah, that's why I was asking earlier about the deadline to submit written comment, because, our April meeting is upon us. This info session isn't until the 24th, and it seems like that's the time that we'll really be able to do more of a deep dive into this. So that's why I was asking if the deadline for comment could be after our May meeting. Is so that we would have time to put that together and to attend the scoping meeting and to read through everything. Because it's not just the scoping document. There's an environmental assessment statement. There's all kinds of stuff to read. We've all got our homework cut out for us. So yeah, so Juki, anything you can do on your end that would give us the time that we need? I think I would want to have a second meeting of our two committees after the May 6th meeting so that we could formalize something.
And the next board meeting is May 20, the big full board meeting is May 21st. So if we were going to take something, it would be after that. Okay. So with that, not seeing any other questions or hands up. Yeah. Okay. Would it, so I'll summarize what you said because you weren't on a mic, which is that this is definitely, the scoping is determining the outline of the environmental assessment, which is different than the process that happens once the ULURP starts. And just to say back to you, Juki, though, that is, we could have a voice on the things like the exemptions and the distance and those are the types of things that during the scoping, we can provide comments on that can help shape the final outcome. Yeah. Yeah. I think this is good to kind of hash this out. So
Yep.
this is why we have this meeting
No,
right
this
now.
is super helpful. And let me, I can also just go back and make sure I can give you some even clearer kind of like understanding of what you're opining on with this. But my understanding of like a lot of the scoping is sort of like how it's less about the kind of the logistics of the proposal itself, as far as like, do we agree with, let's say the waterfront like exemptions? It's a great point. But a lot of what this, and that is something that absolutely is kind of like when you're talking about ULURP, what is kind of like what the board is opining on. But as far as the scope of like the environmental review of the proposal, I think a lot of it is about sort of, is the review, it's sort of opining more on the environmental review itself than it is on the proposal, the details of the proposal. That's my understanding. If I'm incorrect, I will go back and make sure we get you some details on this. And this is in no way to, like, I think just want to make sure it's very clear, like, what the board will be opining on in the scoping process.
And I think that's an accurate description of what a scope is. So I think for us, we may not necessarily be looking at, is it 500 feet or is it 1,000 feet? But we might be looking at, well, we want to include air quality and street safety around public schools or, things of that nature. We want to make sure that all of our considerations get considered. And that's what the scope is for. And that's why I'd like to see us as a joint committees to kind of be proactive about being engaged in this process, because the more we ask to be considered, the better the final output is going to be.
Well said. Good. Thank you. Okay. So I think we can wrap up with
Yep.
that.
Love it.
Thank you.
We're so efficient. Thanks, guys.
See you all on Wednesday at the full board meeting.
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. What? Thanks. I got land use for a reason, man.
No,
I
it's
know what a
perfect.
scope is.
Well, and also just like, I think explaining to people, maybe like why that.
Right.
Just like,
Yeah.
that we can do that. Thank you.
Oh, and I love working with you. Yeah?
Right. No one is gonna sit down. That's the thing, no one's gonna. Yeah.
I will.
No,
I've read 150 page EISs. A 30-page scope is nothing.
Like, but to focus people, otherwise
Right.
you're just very.